All right. So book review. Those are due, I believe, in early May, like first week of May. You don't have to do book review. Book review is if you would like an A. I know some of you go like, no, I have to do book review. I have to get an A. Yeah, that's cool. Some of you is like, nah, I'd like to have the extra points because I'm hanging out on 78 and I'd like to have an 80. So I get that. So if you do the book review, the only problem this can cause you is if you plagiarize. So just don't cheat, okay? So book review, find a book, second half of US history, Civil War, Reconstruction, really, and beyond. Read something you're interested in. I know that my list is short, so you surely don't have to pick anything from the list. You want a suggestion, let me know. If you pick something not on the list, just let me know. It's very rare. Yeah, the book review is optional. Yeah, yeah. Now it can give you extra points. I mean, it's points that aren't fit into the scale. So, it might be helpful, but yeah, you have to do it to get an A. But other than that, you don't have to do it. And I don't know if you need an A or not. I don't know what you're doing here. You just need to pass, if you're getting dual credit, if you need to transfer somewhere. I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. So some of you need an A, some of you don't need an A, some of you have no idea if you need an A. So, I don't know what to tell you either. Well, I haven't decided. I'm sorry. I know I said I would decide, but I haven't decided yet about looking on the quizzes. I know you want a curve. I know. Everyone always wants a curve. It is not possible to get an A without the book review. That is correct. So even if all your grades are super stellar, it's not sort of, it is a department requirement. I'm sorry about the sheesh. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to tell you, my boss says there's no, my boss will fire me if I give extra credit. I promise you. Yeah, no, they're funny like that. They go like, "Do you think this is high school?" And because I used to teach high school, they really give me a hard time. I'm not kidding. So, but yeah, people have been turning in late weekly questions. I'm gonna kind of assess where we are on the late weekly question thing. Some of you like, if there's one that's late and it's a day or two late, that's not the end of the world. For a couple of you, I'm sorry, you haven't turned in like 5. That you have to take care of. And, to be fair, you should have taken care of it already. So I'm going to set a really hard deadline. As last time I'll take questions these questions, last time I'll take these questions, and I'll post that. Now, here's your issue with continually putting stuff off, besides it's a really bad habit. And I know some of you go like, you haven't finished grading. Like, yeah, but I'm not 2 months behind like a couple of you. All right, I'm like a week, and I'm not even really a week. So give me a break. Give me a break. No, I'll catch up on the grading. But here's the thing. When class is over, like the last day of class, which is a Thursday, and then you take that quiz on the Friday, my grades are due Tuesday. So those of you who are in the habit of turning stuff in a week late, you're just getting a 0 on the last stuff if you don't do it, because I can't take it after my grades are due. I'm like the IRS at some point, there's a hard and fast due date and you can't even pay late with a penalty. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe you don't. Do you guys pay taxes? I know you. All right. So book review, the assignments posted. If you have questions, let me know. I think I have a video that's just about the book review, and I think that I posted that to where it's public. But mostly just follow the directions. No tax evasion. It's a bad idea. Although I have a brother-in-law who works for the IRS, and he says they are badly understaffed. So if you're going to do it, I guess, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. So book review, start thinking about that. Let me know if you have any questions about a specific book, anything like that you might want to read. I hardly ever say no. And people have, like last semester, I had people reading like super conservative biographies because there's a bunch of those. Fox News, those folks make a ton of money writing books. I'm happy for them and only slightly jealous, because they're not all historians, shockingly enough. But then there are also other folks writing more liberal versions of history, And I've had people reading those as well. I had somebody read some stuff about critical race theory last semester while somebody was reading a Bill O'Reilly biography of some president. So, you read whatever is interesting to you. I would suggest to you that if you read something more modern and maybe I don't want to say either of those things are more political, but they're definitely more modern. Be sure to address the idea that these folks maybe have a different point of view, which is fine. I mean, we want people, I do at least, I want to read stuff from people with different points of view because I kind of like to understand what people are thinking and why. Yeah, I'm good with either liberal stuff, conservative stuff, textbook stuff, kind of fond of that. All right. All right. Reminder, weekly question. Hopefully I pulled up the right thing where I don't put my comments on your weekly questions. Yep. Okay, good. Whew, got nervous there. All right. So your weekly questions, the one I was grading, oh my goodness, kids, the Great Depression one. That's the one that, and I'm just about to grade the New Deal one. I'll probably grade that tomorrow. Sorry, I'm behind. But the Great Depression one, I know that I've said this to you before, and I mean this in the nicest way. When you say that something is caused by something, don't say it's because that guy was stupid or that guy was racist or that guy was sexist. I mean, you can say that. I'm not trying to stop you. But then show me how that guy was stupid or racist or sexist. Because I had people argue that the Great Depression happened because Herbert Hoover was stupid. Like, I don't know if Herbert Hoover was stupid, but I can give you some evidence that suggests he wasn't. He graduated from Stanford as a mining engineer and was a multimillionaire before he was 30. Now, I recognize that graduating from Stanford, being a mining engineer and being a multimillionaire don't necessarily mean that you aren't stupid in some aspect of your life. I get that, but he had some skill at something. He also was the Secretary of Commerce for the entire 1920s until he was elected president and took office in 1929. So to suggest, as some of you did, that he didn't have a good understanding of economics, no. No, you can't say that. You can't say that because he did. It's just economics changed. There's a reason this was the Great Depression, because it was global and the economy had become international, and the stuff that affected people in one country affected people in other countries, and commerce was international, and we just had a world war. So stuff changed and his ideas didn't. That doesn't necessarily mean he's stupid. Throughout all of modern history, his ideas would have worked until we needed them to work. To say that his understanding of economics might not have been in touch, that's fair. Or he didn't embrace Keynesian economics, the idea that you need to spend your way out of a depression. I could live with that assessment as well. But I would really work hard not to answer a question by saying somebody was stupid or somebody was racist or somebody was sexist, unless you wanted to give some examples. I do recognize it is much easier to give examples of racist and sexist. So when you decide that people are racist and sexist, then you're welcome to any of those conclusions. You can even say people are stupid. Just give specific examples. We always want specific examples. Also, a couple of you said, but you didn't prove, you didn't give examples. But you gave examples of racist stuff that happened in the 20s and then said that led to the Great Depression. And I don't know that, anti-immigrant feeling led to the Great Depression. And some of you argued that it led to the Hawley Smoot tariff. It's like, no, I think that was protectionism. But I mean, I'm the history teacher, and I probably have more specific knowledge about a lot of this stuff than most of you. I hope so, because it's my job. That we did pass a lot of racist laws in the 20s, and they were primarily about immigration. And we certainly thought eugenics was a thing. I'm not sure how that directly would lead to the Great Depression. And certainly we practiced segregation, and there is no doubt. And I think you could make a case that the Great Depression was harder on people of color and people in poverty, because anything like that is going to be harder on people of color and people in poverty because there's too much of an intersection between people of color and people in poverty. So I get that, and you could effectively argue that. I don't know that you could have effectively argued that racism led to the Great Depression. So racism is always a thing, always in US history. I get that. It just may not always be the thing. Often it is. Great Depression may be one of those instances where it's not. All right, and then I'll grade the New Deal one and we'll talk about that next time. So today's question, was World War II. World War II is often referred to as the Good War. Evaluate the title for the war. Is it appropriate? Why or why not? And I know, this brings in a lot of opinion. Believe me, I understand that. And that's mostly what we're going to talk about today. So I'm kind of hoping you'll participate, maybe type in the chat, shout something out from time to time, unless you're at work, and then they probably don't want you shouting out like Hitler was terrible, because that may not work well at the, wherever you're working. But try really hard to give specific examples of what you thought was good, what you thought was bad. I think, and you don't have to agree with me at all, I think the best way to tackle this question, little intro about why World War II started, why we got involved, super short. And then what was good about participation in World War II and what was bad. I think I'd have a good, bad paragraph or bad, good paragraph, however you like, and then a brief conclusion. But give specific examples. That's what I would say. Yeah, and I'm never gonna argue, like if you say no, it was all crap, just give me an example of all the stuff that was crap. And then, but if you're going to argue that like it was all bad, you need to acknowledge that people are going to disagree with you. Like most people are going to say, one of the good things that happened in World War II is that people stood up to Hitler. Because I don't know too many people that go like, no, we should have just let that guy go. However, you could easily argue that standing up to Hitler could have taken a different form. But you can't ignore if you're going to argue that the whole war was terrible, you can't ignore well, at least we stood up to Hitler argument. You need to counter it, okay? So, and counter these things or argue these things with some specific examples, even if it's just a list of countries that participated in the war. When you talk about, death is terrible, mention how many people died, look for some statistics in the book. When you mention discrimination that maybe happened during the war effort, give an example, that sort of thing. Oh gosh, so examples, you know what I'm saying. All right. I didn't get the 3-minute warning, so I can keep going. I'm so unprepared for class, I don't even have anything to drink. So I really don't. That's so sad. So we may have to have a break in the middle where I run 10 feet to the refrigerator to get something to drink, or maybe water. Water's good for you, right? All right, let's talk about US history. Let's do it. All right, so at battle chart, this certainly, could, I was gonna look to see which battles were on the quiz, but I may have listed that in the review list. I'll have to look here. Sorry, forgot. All right, battles, what's going on in the United States, and then we'll talk about good versus bad. Okay, so in the United States, I think we already mentioned this, the economy changes, unemployment's no longer an issue, and the Great Depression ends. And again, I'll suggest to you, I don't really think that we got involved in World War II intentionally to end the Great Depression, although there's always one conspiracy theorist person, not necessarily in class, but you probably know somebody who thinks that. There's just not a lot of evidence to suggest that, but evidence doesn't keep people from arguing their point, does it? War Production Board coordinates the economy, so clearly the Supreme Court has changed its mind about the private sector and the public sector working together. And what you've probably noticed as you've observed life, even though one of you that has no interest in politics at all, you may have noticed, there's probably more than one of you, the one of you who admitted it. You heard about COVID. I know did. And there's a vaccine for that thing. You probably heard about that too. Part of the reason we have that vaccine is some politicians and some businessmen said, you know what, it'd be really helpful if we got that vaccine. And the politicians said, you know, we'll spend whatever it takes, which means a boatload of money, to get that vaccine quickly. And then the businesses said, you know what, we can make that vaccine quickly if you give us a bunch of money. So there's this public-private partnership. So now we have a vaccine, which unless, oh gosh, I know I'm not trying to bring anything political or scientific in. I'm just trying to suggest that that public-private partnership led to a development of a vaccine much faster, and probably the government was more likely to approve the trials and the results of the trials a little faster, which I know is why some people are a little skeptical of the vaccine, that sort of stuff. Full disclosure, I got vaccinated. I'm 2 for 2, so I'm good. That's, yeah, you probably heard me whining about my first injection. Yeah, okay. But public-private partnership, when we're in times of emergency, we tend to be more okay with. And I think that Supreme Court ruling that said the NRA and AAA were unconstitutional, it was a little early in the process. You'll notice that as time went along and the Supreme Court changed makeup, that I don't mean the stuff on their face, but who was on the Supreme Court, that they didn't declare any more of the New Deal unconstitutional. That also kind of goes back to that idea that we start to expect our government to be more forceful and take more power in emergency situations. And we still have arguments about that even now. I was listening to some local politicians talk about whether or not they thought the mask mandate was a good idea. And I remember in particular my city council, the day that the governor gave the mask mandate, I think it was the day or maybe the day after, they had a council meeting, and some of them were very strongly opposed, and almost to the point where they were in tears because they thought that the governor had really kind of violated their individual liberties, which was to me kind of interesting. We'll just go with that. It was interesting to me because I'm weird and like politics. I don't want to be involved in it, but I like observing it. So those people on the city council that were that upset, they would not be in favor of using national power to meet a crisis. They seem to, I mean, they think, my interpretation of what they think is that this is something more for states or individuals to deal with. You can see that this is around the era, the 30s and the 40s, where the country as a whole becomes more comfortable with using federal power to meet national tragedy, disaster, problem, crises, that sort of thing. And I think we still see, even in the modern era, that mostly the country is still like that, but there are different levels and layers of comfort with government intervention. That was a long statement, just to say what I said, wasn't it? Okay. All right. We already mentioned a bunch of people are making money, so people are paying taxes, and the government likes it when people pay taxes because then they have money to do stuff like cool stuff like pay the military or build some roads, but other stuff too, like I don't know, social programs, which you'll see start to develop in the 30s and then more as time goes along. Office of War Information, I know we talked about that. So pro-war propaganda, you'll see Hollywood making movies that support the war effort. You'll also, if you watch, there's some video called Disney Goes to War. So Disney will make pro-World War II cartoons, and you'll see, I think there's one, oh, the duck. I can't remember which duck goes to war. Donald Duck goes to war, or something. I can't remember, but where he lives gets invaded by Nazis. So that's kind of interesting. And then he ends up like holding a hidden Statue of Liberty. I don't know. It's very it's very nationalistic kind of stuff, but very acceptable for the time period. To be, to have that link between public and private industry, even in things you would consider propaganda. So lots of Disney cartoons from that time period, some fairly, what you would see as inappropriate stuff. There was was it Superman who saves the United States from some Japanese saboteurs, but they call them some unusual names. So there's lots of stuff you would look at now and you go like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that. But it would be perfectly acceptable during that time period. We have some very strong anti-Japanese rhetoric in that era. Um, oh, and I don't know, crud. I always wonder if I can show you videos, if you can see them or hear them. And I don't know that I want to show you a video during our class, but I may just, I think the link's embedded. Let me check. Yeah, it's embedded in the notes. Oh, can you see it now? Crud. Can you see the video or do you still see the notes? You have to, oh, you're telling me. Hang on. Notes only. Okay, all right. But if you open the notes and click on the link, you'll see the video. Oh, ugh. Am I saying bad words? I'm not, am I? I never say bad words. I should. Right now would be a good time. Okay, I'm not saying bad words, but you can probably see my face again. I'll put the notes back up in a second, but I'll send a separate link to this video. Okay. I'll send a separate link to the video so you can watch it. I know you'll want to. Why wouldn't you? And every once in a while, I give like an optional assignment, which I may go ahead and do about this video. But it's really the optional assignments about government propaganda during World War II. This video about internment camps, I assume you know about internment camps, but I will also tell you when I was your age, or younger than you, which is hard to imagine that at some point I was younger than you, but I was. In the 1980s, when I had US history class, no one talked about internment camps because I don't know why. I don't know if we just didn't talk about them because, oh, I don't know why you can't see the Blackboard, the videos from, I'll try to, I'll look at that. The summer videos. I may have hidden them because I was afraid people would use them against me. So I probably need to go back and change the permissions. Yeah. Well, anyway, the internment camp video is made by the United States government, and it explains, if you're wondering, like, what are internment camps? After Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, we were fairly anti-Japanese. That's going to be my understatement of the day. So our thought was Japan would invade the West Coast. And when they did, Japanese immigrants or people of Japanese heritage, rather than being American, like they were 2/3 US citizens born in the United States, rather than siding with the United States, they would somehow side with Japan and try to help take over the country with Japan. So we thought the best way to protect ourselves and them, of course, from prejudice, because we wouldn't want the Japanese Americans to get hurt, the best way to protect them was to remove them from their homes, make them sell their homes and businesses, and put them in prison. Yes, very nice of us to want to protect Japanese Americans in such a thoughtful way. So the video explains why we did that and how we went about it and how they really didn't mind. So it has video of the Japanese Americans going to camp and going to these camps. They call them internment camps. Sometimes people do call them concentration camps. I'm not saying that you can't, you call them whatever you like, but I do want you to make a distinction, at least a mental distinction between those and what happened in Nazi Germany and Poland, because the goal, please believe me, I am not defending internment camps. Neither, is the Supreme Court later on, and the Congress apologists later on, and the guy who started the Supreme Court case will eventually get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So this is one the United States, this is one of those few times the United States government court says, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? We are sorry, public apology and a check. That, how many times that happens in US history. It's like once and then a little, maybe some after, but not very often. So I'm not defending internment camps, okay? I'm on record there. But these are not places we sent people to kill them, but we did pretty much take away all of their freedom and their stuff and send them to prison when they had a camp, because it's essentially a prison because they couldn't leave, and not a prison the way that some of my high school students used to say school was. School is not a prison. But I mean, gates locked, armed guards on the perimeter, we took all your stuff. Yeah, that sort of thing. So these are bad. The intention was not to kill folks, but the intention was to take away their liberty and their stuff. And we did both. We took away their liberty and their stuff. And the sites they went to typically were deserts. So it's not like they went nice places. It is not high school at all. Don't say stuff like that. Oh my goodness. All right. And well, I don't know. Maybe the high school you go to or you went to wasn't any of the ones I taught at, I'm pretty sure. But internment camps, clearly terrible. This video, government made video that explains why we did it. So they would have shown that video at the beginning of movies, the same place you would see newsreels, that sort of thing. So interesting piece of history that you could look at that might be interesting to you and might have an additional assignment available if I decide I'm in the mood and want to grade more stuff, which I don't, but I might do it anyway, just because I think it might benefit you, but we will see. All right, so this fellow named Fred Korematsu, that tells you probably where he's actually born, because you're born in Japan, they probably don't name you Fred, do they? But Fred Korematsu, US citizen, gets put in an internment camp, and he says it violated his rights. He gets a lawyer, goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, nope, these are legal. So we start these in 42, and people stay in them until 45. There are going to be some people who volunteer to fight from these camps, like they join the military, which to me may be one of the most astonishing things of the World War II. That you could have a government who takes away your life, well, not your life, but your liberty and your property. And then you go like, hey, I want to fight for that country. Because to me, it'd be like, nope, nope. You fight your own battles because you took all my stuff and you clearly don't trust me, so I'm not doing squat for you. But these dudes, super patriotic and wanted to prove that their country had misjudged them. And it was weird and noble and maybe confusing all at the same time. The 442nd Nisei Soldier Division, but amazing folks. But the Supreme Court says, no, this is legal. And then later on, there's a commission that examines this, that includes the Supreme Court. And they say, no, this was a result of racial prejudice and war hysteria. It's like, no kidding. And eventually, by eventually, I mean 40 years later, the Congress will issue an apology, a check to everyone who's still alive that was in the camp. I think it was like 20 or 25,000 bucks, which isn't even close to the value of the property that they lost. And it's 40 years later, and a lot of them were dead. And I know, but governments rarely issue apologies and checks, so it's unusual historically. And Fred Korematsu, who's about 90 at this point, gets the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I think he got it from George Bush. I think that's the last year of the older George Bush presidency. All right. Also, you're going to see the beginning of the civil rights movement, and you're going to see that happen during the war, and you're going to see it happen after the war as well. And I know the NAACP is involved. I mean, again, I'm the history teacher, I know stuff. So the NAACP had been working on some cases to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson since the 1920s. So they're starting to make pretty good progress during this era, and they're going to make even more progress when the war is over. But you're also going to see individuals go on strike in the United States because they're not being paid the same wages in their wartime jobs. So it will force the United States government, the threat of a strike with A. Philip Randolph and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the threat of the strike is going to force the US government to pay everybody the same wage, because ending production in the middle of the war would have been bad. And of course, the president said, if you do this, you'll look unpatriotic. And they went, yeah, because paying people unfair wages looks patriotic. And then they created the Fair Employment Practices Commission, where you could go, and if you were in a wartime job, which a lot of the new jobs were during that era, then you could go and say, look, I'm being mistreated because of my race. And they would look into your case. And often you would get rulings that were helpful. This wasn't necessarily one of those things where they just did it for show. You're going to also see millions of African Americans serve in the military, and you'll see something called the Double V campaign arise because of that. And the thought behind that is, if we can achieve victory overseas against racism, then it's time to have victory within the United States against racism. And you'll also see, when the war ends, beginnings of Pan-Africanism. Some of that has to do with I think it's between World War I and World War II, the world powers, the colonial world powers, which I know you would consider the United States one of them, but really they're thinking more European colonial world powers, get together and essentially divide up who gets to control Africa. So you are going to see Pan-Africanism as a movement arise between World War I and World War II, a little more internationally at first, or not in the United States, and then you see the growth of it within the United States. And oh gosh, W.E.B. Du Bois, it's like the guy from NAACP, W.E.B. Du Bois will be a Pan-African nationalist as well. Yeah, you'll see some of that. You go like, only if I look. That is correct, only if you look. All right, I know we're not done for today, but I'm going to stop for a second and see if you guys have any questions. All right, do you guys have any questions? Because we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the weekly question. Yeah, the weekly question. Do you guys have any questions? Is there anything you want to ask? Looking to see Joe Biden. He's answering questions right now, but not about World War II. Although he's old enough, almost old enough, that he would remember. He's pretty old, but he's not that old. All right. Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. $19 Fortnite card. I'm sure that has meaning to everyone who's not me. Okay. Oh my gosh. Why did I even stop to let you ask questions? Okay. My dad, who loves history because he's old, was asking, like, are your students doing really well during this time? And I went, I'm going to go with kind of a big no. No offense, but I mean, this thing is hard, so I get it. And they go like, and he says, why not? And I should show him this chat right now. It's like, because they want the $19 Fortnite card. Let's talk about the weekly question. You ready? Weekly question. Let me put it back up. But then you guys have to say some stuff in the chat, not about the $19 Fortnite card. Fortnite, all I know is that's some game that keeps you guys from doing your homework. All I know. That is not the weekly question, is it? Yeah, I do Zoom videos sometimes with our soccer board, and I have a couple of board members in their 20s, and they're always playing some video game. It's not Fortnite, it's something else. I really couldn't tell you what it is. All right, weekly question. World War II, often referred to as the Good War. Evaluate that title for the war. Is it appropriate? Why or why not? So let's start with, I'm going to look in the chat and see if I'm happy. Roblox, that's what they play. Yeah, there's a game called COD. Isn't that the fish you eat during Lent? So World War II, often referred to as the Good War. Let's start with that. What reason could you see of World War II being called the Good War? Whether you agree with it or not, I think this is probably where we need to start. So why would somebody call, okay, so World War II, because there's a good intention, Hitler is stopped, good based on your stance. So you wouldn't say that everybody who participated, but I think you guys are right that people saw this as the good versus the evil, and it's really hard, and I would never suggest you do this for a million reasons. It's really hard to look at Hitler and say, you know what, that guy had some good points, maybe because no, it's Hitler. Almost everybody who looks at what Hitler was doing says that's just purely evil. To blame one group of people for the depression, try to kill them all, and then take over all the neighbors' land in the process of eliminating a race of people from the earth. Very few people look at that and go like, nope, that was good. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to know what that means. I'm just saying in the chat. So, and certainly you can talk, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with people having, yeah, Lebensraum. Okay, thanks for taking us back to history. Living space for the German people. And the German people felt like they had been legitimately wronged by the end of World War I. You could certainly argue that. But yeah, I'm way too old to think of Hitler as a legitimate video game character, potentially. That's frightening to me, not gonna lie. The German people could have made a case that they were wronged by the Treaty of Versailles. Yeah. However, they could not make a case that Hitler's actions were a reasonable response to that. Okay. So, and one of you also said it got us out of the Great Depression. And I think that's a fair thing to mention. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's good for the economy. I don't think anybody's going to say, well, except the one crazy person somewhere is going to say that's the reason that the war started was to improve the economy. But it's certainly our involvement in the war and then joining the war certainly did improve the economy, no doubt. All right, so that's why it's often referred to as the good war. And then as far as good results of the war, I think improving the economy. Can you think of other things that come out of the war that are good? So if you're arguing some of the results of the war are good, some of the results are bad. So aside from the economy improving, any specific points? So should we go? Yeah. I think when you're arguing the good versus the bad, when you say something is good, like I know you can generally say the United States emerged from the Great Depression, and I don't think you need to add too many statistics, but you can mention that we had full employment, and you can mention the record number of people paying income tax as proof that we came out of the Great Depression, but nobody's going to argue with you, but still, it's always good to have proof. Other things that come out of World War II that you think are potentially good. And see, I'm assuming you kind of know how it ends. You know how it ends. I know we talked about atomic weapons. I know you're going to put that in the bad category. Most of you, gosh, I hope you're going to put that in the bad category. You guys are making me nervous in the chat. But but in the good category, at the end, before the end of the war, you see different countries working together on the Allied side, and they developed something called the United Nations. Now, you may or may not have an opinion on whether that's a good thing or not. Yeah, Hitler, like the rest of you, as a younger person, I was interested, curious about how Hitler thought, even though he's a pretty horrifying person. And then for whatever reason, in a World War II class I took in college, they gave me a book. They assigned a book to each of us to read. There was a different book. And mine was a psychological analysis of Hitler, which, it's hard to do post-mortem. Certainly he never sat down with a psychiatrist, but they suggested lots of things that were wrong with his thinking process about, feeling rejected, about how he was really more Austrian than German, and this rise to power, meteoric rise to power in some ways that was fueled by some violent episodes that he helped to organize, tricky stuff. Yeah. All right. Do we ever ban no. I mean, you're going to have the Nuremberg trials where we're certainly going to denounce people. People will get executed as a result of their participation in World War II. There's a Geneva Convention that talks about how, certain treatment of prisoners in particular is wrong. There is some evidence that Hitler used amphetamine, some other stuff to deal with some legitimate medical issues, but then some not legitimate medical issues. And certainly they weren't prescribed by doctors necessarily. But in theory, we've banned concentration camps. In practice, in practice, you clearly, for whatever reason, and this could be a discussion we have later in the class because it'll fit into some of our content. We are clearly not, the UN is clearly not at a point where they're comfortable denouncing China's treatment of ethnic groups, Muslims, Uyghurs that are in re-education camps. Yeah, no, there's definitely a multi-million person problem in China for sure, for sure. All right. So creation of the United Nations, and the idea behind the United Nations was that it would prevent this sort of stuff because nations would act against each other before a third world war happened. Also pledges from the United States, whether it's good or bad, you guys can put that in a category, of course, to get involved in international events before they escalated to the point of a world war, because in both World War I and World War II, because of distance, the United States is able to stay out. Yeah, I was trying to talk about some of the topics that you might want to add in here. So, I would talk about, let me look, sorry, that's the 1301 book. I know, I've got them both handy. All right. New deal, wrong chapter. Okay. So when you're assessing whether the war is good or bad, and we could still probably talk about things that might have been good, some of you are going to think that some of the development of the military is good. I know there's probably not going to be very many of you that are going to think the development of the atomic bomb is good, and I get that. Also, some people are going to argue that the war is good because it unified people, that sort of thing. I forgot to break to go get something to drink, didn't I? This international push for the 4 freedoms. So when you're looking through your textbook, more women in the workforce, the rise of the civil rights movement, the creation of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, economic Bill of Rights, there's going to be stuff like that that maybe you'll look at and you'll go like, that was good. That was good. And this stuff is going to start around page 8. It's most of the chapter. So if you're going to talk about the economy, the home front, if you look on page 873, that's kind of where that section starts. So 873, let me put that in the chat, home front. Okay, so 873, home front. And it's going to talk about stuff maybe that the economy, women in the workforce, free enterprise system growing, the economy, I already said the economy growing, the beginning of the civil rights movement. I would look specifically at the Voices of Freedom pages, not vices. And these are going to be a little bit more about civil rights. But you'll see somebody who starts or is part of the League of Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, which is pretty big in Texas. I know my father-in-law was kind of on the ground floor of that and loved to talk about it, as he should, deservedly so, because he felt, and a lot of other people felt like, because Mexican Americans were not treated well by the veterans of foreign wars and sometimes not even allowed to join, they created a separate veterans group, League of United Latin American Citizens, in part for World War II veterans. And then there's an essay called What the Negro Wants, related to the four freedoms on page 889, understanding that while Negro certainly not a word we would use now, we would say African American or Black, but certainly okay for the time period. All right, so birth of the Civil Rights Movement, you see it discussed on 895. I'm really having trouble typing. I won't tell you what I just typed, it wasn't good. It was a curse word because I can't type well. Okay, birth of the Civil Rights Movement starts on 895. I think these are all things most of us would argue would be positive things that come out of the war. And then you can also talk about United Nations. So sorry. To prevent further typos, I had to stop talking and typing. So on page 902, it's going to start talking about international conferences, more than one, sorry, and United Nations. So some of those things I think you could legitimately argue were good things that came out of the war. Okay, so I think using a couple of specific examples is a really, really good idea. Okay, and you might also argue the GI Bill of Rights, and that's going to be life-changing for a lot of people as well. You'll see this on page 882. This gives benefits to soldiers after their service. Sometimes, well, it can pay for their college, helps them get low-interest loans for houses. So it's definitely going to change the futures of lots of millions of people who serve in the military. It's also going to be a source of civil rights issues as well, because lots of the African Americans who served in the military, you know, they think it's cool that they get free college, but then the colleges won't let them in because they're Black. So it's going to lead to more integration efforts. So kind of interesting stuff. All right. So if you're going to argue bad things that happened as a result, oh my goodness, I just realized that all the stuff I was typing, I wasn't necessarily typing to all of you. Well, crud. Why didn't you guys tell me? Because you didn't know, right? So I'm going to copy and paste it. Give me a second. Yeah, because no one wants to see me try to type again. Okay, so home front on 873. Or I should ask the one of you that I actually typed it to. Oh my gosh, it's so sad. Oh my goodness. Okay, so that was birth of the Civil Rights Movement. I guess I could correct the one thing that was messy. Yeah, you guys are laughing at me, but you were playing video games or talking about weird stuff. Weird kids talking about weird stuff. What's wrong with the kids nowadays? What is this Roblox? Okay. United Nations. Okay, so home front I already put in. Bill of Rights, did I put that in? I think that's the next thing. All right, and if you guys are making fun of me in the new message, I don't need to see that. Okay, all right. All right. And somebody's just checking in. I don't even see, you take a second off and you're talking about duck life. I really don't understand. Okay, so the things that are in the chat now to everyone, not just one person, hopefully will be helpful as you're answering stuff that was good that resulted from World War II. Okay. Now, if you're going to argue that it was bad, are you going to have any trouble with this? You gonna have any trouble arguing that things didn't go perfectly during World War II? Because I know you're gonna talk about the atomic bomb, as you should. Why would you leave that out? It makes good sense. So you want to talk about the atomic bomb, but you could also talk about assimilation, whether you think that is good or bad. So there's a section that starts off the American dilemma. And this section is going to be probably pretty helpful. Talks about Native Americans, Japanese American internment. This is a long section, okay? It is. There's no way around it. Double V campaign. So let's get you all the way to 899. I know it's kind of long, but that's okay, right? And then weapons. And then I'll look at your comment in just a sec, I promise. So 900. And did I type? Yeah, I did type that to everyone this time. That's good. Let's see. Peace but not harmony. So 900 to 904. So it's kind of the end of the chapter. Now, yeah. Let's see. It's interesting to me that the two nukes on Japan reshape. You know, what happened to Japan? It's hard for us to kind of to see the way that they saw during the time period. And I know I talked to you about this last time and you kind of thought I was a little crazy. And I understand that because I'm never going to suggest to you, like, you know, internment makes sense in the time period. Blaming the Jews for stuff makes sense in the time period. I'm not suggesting that any of that is defensible. It isn't. I mean, clearly it's not. And certainly the use of nuclear weapons on people is pretty horrific, no doubt. And I know we have much worse, more deadly stuff now. I know it's, try not to think about that too much, but it's true, we do. But here's the deal. There's a race to make the atomic bomb during that time period with the assumption that whoever gets it will use it to end the war. So the race was, you know, our side versus their side, good versus evil. We wanted the good side to have the atomic bomb, which I know is a huge contradiction to you, like good and atomic bomb, use of atomic bomb. I get it, I do. But I'm just telling you that's the way that they thought about it. So when we're developing it, the thought is never we're going to use it to threaten people or we're going to use it for technology to produce energy. The thought is we're going to use it to stop the other side. So we got it, we used it to stop the other side, and everyone saw that as in the intended use of the development of the nuclear weapon. I am not ever going to suggest to you that once we used it, we said, no, that was good, because it was horrific. I mean, there's no way around it. The destruction that, even though, you know, people who developed these were physicists, they were intelligent people, they understood the power behind it, but you know, understanding it and then seeing it are two different things. And I think that book Hiroshima really kind of exemplifies the reaction to the use of the nuclear weapon. I think it's Robert Hershey. He was a journalist and he went to Hiroshima and traced the lives of 5 people after the bomb. And that may be something you want to read for your book review. And you don't even have to ask me, you know, about that. You can absolutely read it. Didn't we throw one and thought it was okay to? It's not exactly how it went. We drop one, we throw one. You guys are playing your video games again. So we dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima, and we also told us, JP, Japan? Yeah, okay. yeeted? You guys are killing me. So we dropped the first bomb. We also drop a bunch of leaflets that say like, you guys need to surrender, and they didn't. And then we dropped some more leaflets that said, if you don't surrender, we're going to drop a second one. Japan didn't surrender. We dropped the second one. Then we're going to suggest to them if they don't surrender, maybe a third one's happening, but they're going to surrender at that point. We didn't have a third one, by the way. I have no idea what yeeted it across the seas were. We flew over Japan with an airplane and dropped it from an airplane. I don't know if that's yeeted it across the seas. Oh my gosh. Okay, but Hiroshima, yeah. You throw it by hand? No, we definitely did not throw it by hand from America. Oh, dear Lord. Okay, so I know I'm not even gonna, oh gosh, okay. I can't look at your chat anymore because it's disturbing me. So I'm closing the chat. I'll reopen it at the end because I'm disturbed by you guys joking around about nuclear weapons, but I understand you're joking. We're a different generation. So it's, yeah, okay, I'm old. We're different. So, okay. I'm also like super sensitive old woman. What are you guys doing? I don't play any video games. So here's the thing. I think it's going to be easier for you to find all sorts of things that make you decide good war doesn't completely fit the situation. You're going to find stuff in the United States that are clearly racist, that involve people taking away other people's civil liberties, their property, that African Americans, Mexican Americans are not treated the same way. There's a section in there about something called the Zoot Suit riots, where a bunch of soldiers attack a bunch of primarily Mexican American young men who are out going to dance clubs because they think they're unpatriotic because of the way they're dressed. Long story, but we had rations, and the book does talk about this. I didn't talk about it very much, but we're rationing a bunch of stuff during World War II because we're sending it over for the war effort. Part of that is cloth to make uniforms and tents and all sorts of stuff. So wool in particular is rationed. And a zoot suit is a really big, goofy kind of suit, and it takes up a lot of cloth. So it violates ration codes to make a zoot suit in the United States. Now, the Zoot Suit riots were in Los Angeles. They just went over the border to Mexico and bought the Zoot Suit. That wasn't illegal. That's what they did. But the soldiers were on leave. They saw them and they attacked them. And then when the police intervened, they put the Mexican American guys who got attacked into jail. And there'll be a strong suggestion that that might have been racist because, well, it was. So that'll be an easy suggestion to make. So you're going to be able to find all kinds of stuff within the United States that suggests that we're not completely on the up and up, although certainly our intent is good and there are good things that come out of this. There's some bad things that happen as well. Plus, you can talk about how many people died, nuclear weapons. You can talk about, enormous casualty numbers in many European countries, the after effects of the weapons in Japan. And I know some of you were discussing, which I think is fascinating as well, that Japan does not get that upset with us the same way that like modern kids are like, oh, we're the most heinous nation in the world because we use nuclear weapons. And I get that conclusion as well. But Japan looks at it like, no, we would have done worse to you if we'd won. And there's no doubt about that. I mean, there really isn't doubt about that. Because you can see what Japan did to prisoners of war. And again, I'm not going to argue that we were always completely blameless on our treatment of, even our own people within the United States, and certainly not always with prisoners of war. However, Bataan Death March, and you read some of the stuff about what the Japanese did just what they did to Korea in general, all the people they killed, and how they forced a lot of Korean women into prostitution. They raped them, all this sort of stuff. This is a horrible, horrible stuff that Japanese soldiers would justify as part of war. So when the Japanese population kind of concludes, well, we would have done worse things to you if we'd won, I think there's evidence to suggest that they're probably telling the truth. And then because Japan gets destroyed during World War II in a massive way, we are also going to spearhead the rebuilding of Japan. And they are going to see that as a compassionate response to their defeat. We are going to see that as a logical response to nuking their country, at least in the modern era. So, all right, I'm going to look back at the chat now and see if I'm okay and you guys are okay, and see if you guys have any questions. But I am hoping that most of our discussion was helpful about how to go about answering the weekly question. Okay, all right. Okay, so all that was left was more talk about. Okay, do you guys have any questions and or comments before we go and before I go and try to just recover from class today? Oh dear Lord. Okay, I'm really not in charge. I'm starting to be worried about you. I have no, I'm mostly kidding. It's not a physics class, so I don't have good information for you about fission versus fusion and that sort of thing. But we did assemble a group of scientists, absolutely, and it was called the Manhattan Project, and we got cool guys like Einstein to come help on it. But yeah, look at those things. Yeah, and don't look. I'm going to agree that maybe looking up videos about how to create an atomic bomb might not be in your best interest. I'm definitely going to agree with that because Patriot Act, it's still a thing. So I'm not sure I would do that. And especially, yes, it is being recorded. And also, if you use a school computer, because I know some of you are dual credit, you know that everything you do on the school computer can be tracked. So and I'm not saying that's why you shouldn't do stupid stuff. I think in general, you just shouldn't do stupid stuff because it's stupid. But I'm just saying, there are other potential consequences besides, just being stupid. Okay, wow. All right. I know this class is going to end up on the evaluation somehow. And I think now is the appropriate time to stop recording.